All right, we will get rolling. Welcome, everybody. I did the very boring thing of counting how many sessions there are going on at this time. I am 33 of the sessions going on, so I have to ask, why are you here when there's 32 other interesting topics that aren't data related? Must be because you have that in your job description or something like that, or somebody's saying, you got to know this stuff. I'm Neil Richmond. I'm one of the founders of Connectable. We've got a number of Connectable clients in the room. Thank you guys that are here. Some of you have heard some of these stories from me before, so I apologize in advance. We are running short on chairs. I have one down here, two down here, actually. That might be it. Oh, we could grab some from over there too if we want. With all of that. There is a worksheet-ish, not really a worksheet, but just a little outline. It's on the back table now, the remaining ones. So if you came in and didn't get that, there's some back there. It's just what I'm going to cover. So it's what it is. You can write some notes on it and so forth from there. But what we're going to be talking about today is really about how do we go about tracking the things that make a difference when it comes to our programs, the outcomes, and all of that. It's not a straightforward thing because, and I'll come through some of this, and I apologize for the people who are on Zoom. I'm not going to stand in front of the camera the whole time. In fact, I probably won't at all, hardly. I'm going to move around. So anyway, you don't want to see me. These are the unlucky people that get that job. You can just listen and look on the screen, and it's all good anyway on that side. But as an organization, Connectable came about because my wife is an adult educator. We were here in Indianapolis. My wife's program actually was about 15 minutes from here. I saw she didn't have the tools that everybody else gets, K-12 and college. And so I started building things for her that I thought would help her to do her job so that she could have a more uniform place for everything. And so here we are. Well, I think the very first thing I did was probably 2017. So, we're 9 years later on with that. And we've built an ecosystem for adult ed. That serves 155 plus adult ed programs in 25 states, and it's specific to what adult ed needs. And I'll share a few things about that. There's more information about us in the back there. But the primary purpose of what I'm going to talk about today is really to give you some tools to look at this whole question of data and where we go and where we take it and all of that. If this will work. So this was working, now it's not. So let's see here what is going on. No, don't need that to be big. All right. Need two hands to operate sometimes. All right, back to it there. So here's a reality check that comes to this topic. I think every program that I've talked to and met with, if you've got somebody who's really good at making sure you've got all the boxes checked. That's an important part of the process. And so there's a lot when it comes to that within adult ed, I know that. But very few programs are genuinely taking the data and changing the course of what you're doing as a result of it. And so that is our reality check today. If you only track what's required, you only improve what you're being audited on. And the reality is, there's a lot more when it comes to adult ed than that. Somebody mind closing the back door for me, please? I know it's loud out there. Thank you, I appreciate that. I was going to get it earlier. So the gap between what you're reporting and the transformation in your program, that's where the impact can be lost. And that becomes a very, very big part of the story that you have to manage. I'm going to get rid of this thing off the screen. There So, a couple questions for you. I'd love some answers on here. What's the one number that you report on every month? Attendance. What else? Gains, right? Measurable skill gains, MSGs, not to be confused with the product they put in Chinese food that you shouldn't have, apparently. All right, 12 hours. Who's had 12 hours, who's not? There's a couple chairs down here for those that have arrived. Yeah, if you can weave your way in there. You sit in the corner there. Yes. All right, what else? Enrollment numbers? Yeah, what else? If you were forced to pick one, what one number would be the one tracking that could take care of a majority of things? MSG, attendance? Is that too low on the food chain, so to speak? Does it need to go up higher? Is the number of students you have in your program too loose? I mean, I don't have answers. I'm just asking questions right now because that's what we often have to think about. And very, very often, depending on your role within the program, you have one, two, maybe three things you're looking at regularly. If you're looking at too much more than that, you're probably going a little too wide more often. So it needs to be narrower. But if you're a teacher, that number's different than if you're an administrator. If you're the data person, that number's different than if you're a supervisor of the GED program. Right? So there is variance when it comes to that. But as we go through what I'm going to talk about today, I want to challenge you to think, if there was one number that you looked at daily, weekly, monthly, what would that one number be that would be a really good measure of what's happening and what needs to happen? So I'll throw that out to you to be thinking about. Question 2 here to sort of chew on there. Does reporting that number make a difference? Don't have to answer that one. You can internally, but yeah. The reality is sometimes numbers have no impact on what happens from today on. And that's a challenge, because then we are looking at the trailing indicators rather than leading indicators. And then if you are managing that, does it prompt a meeting, a discussion, a connection to make a difference? That's a key part right there. And then again, if you're answering no to those things, then you're not measuring for growth and accountability. And that's a very important part of the journey. So here's the shift that I want you to think about. And for those on Zoom, I have some illustrations here in the room. Many of you look at data as a filing cabinet, and I know this is not a filing cabinet, but I did not want to lug a filing cabinet in and out with everything, but you get the idea. You get your data, you open your little folder up, you push it all in there and everything. Some of you even get really cool and make a fancy little label for it and all that good stuff. You do all of that. You put the folder back in the filing cabinet, you slam the door shut, and that never gets opened again. Maybe one more time when you have to report stuff, but in the meantime, it just sits in there. And that's where the data lives. I want to suggest to you, and the point of what I want to say today is your data should be a steering wheel, not a filing cabinet. Now, I couldn't get a real steering wheel. Apparently, that's not an easy thing to do. I didn't realize that. So a cover for a steering wheel is all we get here for those that are in the room. But think about the difference. The filing cabinet, that's behind me, right? That's historical data. But I haven't driven too many vehicles where the steering wheel's behind me. The steering wheel's in front of me. I'm charting the course of where I'm going with a steering wheel. With a filing cabinet, I'm telling you where we've been. And so as you think about the things that I'm going to share with you today, I want you to think about how can you turn your data from historical fact into future transformation. How can it be a steering wheel for you and your program instead of it just being a place that where the data lives and off we go from there, never doing much more with it? So that's the vision, the path that I want to take as we go through this journey here today. I don't know why my thing keeps wanting to do that. You have to stop asking yourself the question, what do we have to report? And start asking the question, what decisions are we trying to make? Okay? So, reframing the question and the data. I've had, over the years, Bradley and I had a discussion about this before we started. Hey, Neil, could you put this interconnectable for us to make our lives easier and so on? I've had that on the data question as well. How can we make it so that we can pull certain information? In the early days, we used to let students type in what language their native language was. And one day I worked out something very significant. There were 10 different versions of Spanish. Spanish spelled in English, correct. Spanish spelled in Spanish, correct. Spanish spelled in Spanish, incorrect. Spanish spelled in English, incorrect. A combination of Spanish and English versions of Spanish. And so it became really difficult to work out how many students speak Spanish when there wasn't a way to make that uniform. And so we flipped the script on that and we said, okay, we're going to stop looking at it from that perspective and we're just going to give you a list of languages that you can then choose from and it will be more consistent. We've had schools ask us about looking ahead for grants. How could we put more information that we're collecting in a way so that we could filter that and work out how many students we have that meet maybe 1, 2, 3, or 4 criteria. We have a scenario that we're working on right now within one state where there's a TANF eligibility, but it's a result of, I think, 5 different questions that are asked in the registration information that if you are yes to all of these, then you are TANF eligible, and you may not even know it. So when we just ask the question, are you TANF eligible, most students may not know the answer to that. But if we ask the question, are you over 18? Do you live in this state? Is your income range within this range? And so on. Do you have a social security number? I think those were some of the ones that we have to ask. All of a sudden, now the window opens a lot wider because without knowing it, the student is indicating their eligibility, but it's just based on their basic questions. So now we can take the data that we're collecting and instead of reporting a number based on this, we are creatively taking that data to actually see who is eligible on things like that. And so we want to start asking the questions, where do we want to go with our program? And what do we need to know in order to get there? Right? So some of the things I heard, attendance, all right, number of students enrolled, MSGs, and there were a number of other things that you said earlier when I asked the question. They are all important factors, but what are they leading to? If you don't ever show up, are you going to make an MSG? Now, the adult ed population, typically, the answer might more often than not be no. All right? If you're not making an MSG, and you can ask all the questions down the line. So where do we start that journey in order to get to the finish line that we're looking for? That's a big part of the question. So there are 3 levels of data that we need to think about. We tend to look at data as one thing. I want to challenge you to think of it in these 3 things, starting down here. We've got compliance data. And the question that we're asking ourselves is, did we submit it? Have our requirements been met? Right, easy. And by the way, I'll be happy to put a copy of this up in the app after. Yeah, I don't put it in before because then people won't want to come when they see the boring stuff I'm going to talk about. Well, no, actually, it's usually because I'm tweaking it up to the last minute. So we'll put it in afterwards. That'll be the official version then. Otherwise, it changes 10 times, so, you know. So this is the ones that most people live down here. But the challenge is to move into these other areas. Performance data. Are we hitting targets? Are outcomes tracking towards goals? You know, we have a goal of this many students achieving their GED this year. All right, great. What are the markers along the way that you're looking for in order to achieve that goal? And guess what? You may not know the answer to that the first time you ask that question. You may not know what it is. Or you may know the categories, but you may not know how many. And that's okay. Because it may take a few cycles of doing that before you start working out, oh, okay, so if we can get this many students, this percent of our students showing up this amount of time, and then we can be getting this many MSGs on a regular basis, we will get to this. Great. So now I can boil it down, and I can say, okay, this month, here's what we need to achieve. Because when we extrapolate that out, we know we'll get to our goal based on the averages of what we've experienced. And you can probably go back, get your filing cabinet out, open up the folder, and have a look at some of your past information to help you to determine that. Very simple. There is one chair over here, and if somebody wants to grab these, you're welcome to take these chairs up back and all that too. So, you know, or you're welcome to sit on the floor. If you fall over, I won't take it personal. So you can go back and look at your past information to say, here's what we experienced in the past, numbers-wise, and here's where we arrived at. Okay, was that good or was that bad? Should that be higher or should that be lower? Let's set a goal, and based on that, let's set some benchmarks along the way, and let's take that a month at a time and look at it. And we can start to drive some action. And then there's transformational data. Are your learners truly succeeding? Giving a GED, I would suggest, is not a marker of success. Getting a GED is not the end of the road. Some of you in the room, I know, are involved in the IET side. Awarding X number of CCMA certifications or welding certifications or other things like that, they are not the markers of success either. I would suggest it's lives changed. It's impacting the workforce positively. It is people who had no hope having hope. All right, so we could argue that's not very measurable. It is in some cases, but it's not so measurable in other cases. So how do we determine what success is truly happening? And then when isn't it happening? And why isn't it happening the way you want it to happen? Or if it's happening here, how do we get it up to here? And then the biggest question you can ask yourselves is, what do we change in order to get it to where we need it to go? That's the key to all of that. So this thing does not want to work. Let's dive into this a little bit deeper, and I want to go into 3 things that I think can make a difference for you when it comes to how this can roll out. But we've got to organize things a little bit. So first of all, we have raw data, all right? That's just numbers in a spreadsheet. You know, this student has this many hours. We have this many of this, and so on. It's just numbers on a spreadsheet at that point. But then you've got structured data, where you begin to look at patterns around that. And maybe you're even bringing 2 or 3 factors together to go, okay, is there something that I can see with this that is saying that this group of students are experiencing this level of success or not as a result of what we're doing? So that's another piece of it. And then the visible data. Right people, right time, that triggers an action, a next step with all of that. I've worked in a number of companies over the years, and some of them are more sophisticated than others. But on one of the businesses I worked in, we had a whiteboard, and up in the top corner of the whiteboard, there were 3 numbers. When a guest came into our office, they had no idea what the 3 numbers were about, but everybody that worked there knew what the 3 numbers were. And they were updated on a daily and a weekly basis for the team to always see where were we on our 3 biggest objectives. And having that visibility had buy-in from everybody as a result of that. And that's where we can start, when we can see it, we can start to talk about change. We're not where we want to be here. Okay, why is that? And start to have conversations and start to drill down deeper and deeper to dig into the data a little bit more. So I want to give you 3 principles that I think can make a difference when it comes to building a system for your data that can lead to transformation. This is principle 1. You have to design for decisions. You have to come up with some way that you can represent this so it is going to lead to questions that lead to decisions that solve problems and help you achieve ultimate objectives. So question number 1 that you're trying to look at is, what problem are we trying to solve to start with? All right? So attendance is low. Let's just start it. Let's just take that one and throw it out there. It's pretty low. I'd call that pretty low on the sequence of events, but let's just start at that point. Comment? Yeah. All right, thinking, yeah. So attendance is low. That's a challenge. Why would it be a challenge? Why would we be concerned about attendance being low? All right? But is funding coming, is your parent body saying, I need to see your attendance records in order to give you money? Because if nobody's attending, the reason they're in adult ed mostly is they need the help to get to the end result that they need. And so attendance is one of the steps on the journey. And if they're not attending, they're not going to be successful. You're not going to be helping them to be successful, and your numbers will show accordingly on all of that. So we start by asking the problem. What is the problem that we're trying to look at and solve? But we're ultimately trying to build around that. Why? What are all the elements that are part of this? Then we have to ask, who needs to see this? Is this a teacher problem? Is this a staff member problem? Is this an administrative problem? It's always a state problem, but, you know, that's whole nother topic. We're not here for that one today. But on your local level, who needs to be involved with this and be a part of it? You know, there's always a fine balance in a adult ed program when it comes to what is a part of the instructor world that is instructor-led and what is pushed down from the top down. You want everybody to buy in on that. And then I will always, you know, like when I'm always trying to look at what we're doing within our ecosystem of building technology and why we're building it and things like that, especially when it comes to automating something, I'm always asking the question, what action triggers that? What action triggers that? Going back to our model here, if we're talking about attendance, and I'm getting the folder out every month to look at the previous month's attendance, we've got a problem. Because I'm looking in the rearview mirror at what happened, and that's an indicator of what might happen, but that's the history. You need to be looking ahead with the steering wheel in mind of what you want to have happen. And what is the gap between the two, and what do we do to improve that? So if attendance is at 50%, students are attending at 50%, and we know if we can get them up to 75%, we're going to get more MSGs, and ultimately students better prepared to be successful and complete their program or to get their GED or that certification or what that is. But if it's less than 50%, we don't get the success rate, but we need to be up closer to that 75. So now, instead of looking in the rearview mirror and going, oh, how did we do last month? I would suggest you're probably needing to look at what is our attendance today? What was our percent attendance rate today? What was our attendance rate this week? And not looking backwards, but staying in the moment. And so if you're not seeing that, and that's too hard to pull and show, then we've got a challenge right away with that. Take somebody a week to pull the attendance together so you can see what the number was. That's not a good thing. Bradley.
Be looking in the rearview mirror at the same time as looking forward.
Absolutely.
So that looking at how many people made a connectable account
Yep.
but never started class.
Yeah, yeah.
We looked at there and we try to capture those people and come back in and find
Yep.
out why they're not doing, so we can fix that.
Yeah. Asking the question why, which means that somebody's talking to those students and somebody's cataloging the reasons and then pulling that together into a to-do list of things. So a great example, and I go back and think of some of the early days of the things we were doing to help programs like Wayne Township here locally. One of the things that I remember distinctly us doing was looking at the attendance situation, and in discovery, realizing that one of the main reasons why attendance was low was a transportation issue. And so students were signing up for classes, but if they didn't have a mechanism to get to classes, then they wouldn't be showing up. And so the way the bus patterns worked, there were students who were signing up for a 9 o'clock class, but they couldn't get that bus and get there by that time in order to attend on a regular basis. So adjusting schedules, that helped to improve things and helping students to see there were other things. But then you've got a problem of like, okay, I have children. I can't do later in the day because I have children. And that opened up another can of worms, so to speak, that had to be solved. Could we come up with a childcare solution? And so going back into the data and doing some discovery, pulling numbers together to then get a grant to get childcare assistance in so that you could offer classes later in the day and improve the attendance trajectory of your students. And then there were students who were struggling not because of public transportation, but and today this has definitely got to be the case, the cost of fuel is prohibitive. And so finding sponsors who would buy gas cards that could be given out to students, not just willy-nilly, hey, you're here, let me give you a gas card, based on their history and incentivize and different things like that, so that they would have the tools that were needed so that they could be there and they could be successful and so on. But the first principle I want to give you is simply the fact that we've got to ask questions and we've got to think about what we're doing in order to achieve the objective. Here are 4 areas that I can think of that just off the top of my head as I was pulling this together that I think can be valuable for adult ed. Weekly enrollment trends. What's the weekly enrollment trend? I'm going to show you an example of a report that we have in our system that is, I think, very instructive for those who are looking at attendance as a factor. Attendance drop-off alerts. Can we quickly identify students who are 10 or more days absent, 20 or more days absent, and so on? And do we have a plan, a system in place to reach out to them to see what's going on and find out? Or better yet, really teaching the students to be responsible, and if they can't show up, to message in to let their teacher know that they aren't available, and so on. Little things like that. Pacing of MSGs, you know. My wife was a GED teacher and all of that, so I saw these patterns. There's a particular time depending on your cycle within your programs where everybody starts to get a little frantic. When is that? Now-ish, right, for the year. But here's the problem with that. Really, when it comes to like MSGs and things like that, it probably should be a monthly thing. It should have started back in August or September, not waiting until May when you finish at the beginning of June to go, oh, do we have enough MSG, you know, and all of this sort of thing. And then post-testing readiness and transition, tracking those people in a very clear and consistent way. And part of this is not just these bullet points, so to speak, but the visibility of those bullet points to all parties involved. That becomes a very key component with all of that. All right, principle 2, make equity visible. So here are some areas, race, ethnicity, gender, age, program type, level at entry, language. These are things that we know can have an influence on the patterns that happen within your programs. And so having a way to see that information, aggregating those numbers. We don't need to know every individual, but category-wise, knowing what they are, so you can look at that and you can see who's being left behind. But if you don't know who's being left behind in that general sense, you can't do anything to mitigate it. If you can't see it, you can't fix it. And so the ability to look that up. So that might be in your state reporting system, right? But that also might take X amount of time to appear in there. I know, working with many different programs, that there are lots of variations on that. There is, monthly of adding of data. There are some people who are adding it in real time, and you get everything in between. So that may or may not be the reality. Our theory, the way we look at it is, we're collecting this from the very first moment they're expressing interest in your program. So we have it from day one regardless. And we can then decide, based on students, I think this is a great one to look at, is students who go through and are successful or go through and register and begin in the program versus students who begin to show interest and then drop off. Is there information here that is affecting that? And if so, being able to pull that together and look at it in relationship to the ultimate data picture could make all the difference in the world when it comes to that. A question in the chat, can I share my slide deck? Yes, so I will put it up in the Hoover app after we get done. So you'll have that, no worries. Happy to share the information that we've got for you here today. All right, and then principle 3. Yeah.
So you said just a moment ago, looking at the data for students who have succeeded and went all the way through against the students who dropped off.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting, like with these data points here, you look at those for the students who completed or graduated your program, and then look at those against the students that maybe failure to launch or whatever?
Yeah.
Can you say
Yeah.
a little bit more about
Well, you'll have to listen to the recording to know what I said because it erases from my mind the moment I say it. So from that factor, I can't guarantee this, but I think I know where you're headed, so we'll circle back. Yeah, so again, I'm going to give it to you in the context of what we do because it makes the most sense to me. There's other ways to look at this, but this is what makes sense to me. We track a student's registration steps. So let's say there are 3 things you require a student do to be registered. 1, complete the registration form. 2, provide a photo ID. 3, make an appointment to come in for testing. Let's just say those are your 3 steps, right? You could compare the students who complete all 3 steps, complete testing, and start classes with students who don't complete all 3 steps and start to look at some of these factors to see, are there any patterns that are forming that we can address? That's where I was leading with that. So if you can't track your student journey in a very quick and easy way, then it's going to be... So what ends up happening is somebody has to sit down and spend all night long pulling numbers together to have a report ready for you the next day. And then 2 days later, if you want it again, you go through that same cycle. And so I'm trying to, really what I'm trying to get everybody to think ahead on this is to say, what do we want and when do we need it, so we can always have it at our disposal, so we can see if this is why we're not getting the success that we're getting in our program. And if it is, then what do we do about it? Does that make sense? Does that sort of resonate in the thought process? But all too often, we are looking back at the filing cabinet when it's all over. It's already happened. It's funny because how many of you are in the role of data in your program, right? So usually when I come along for the very first time to a school, the data person looks at me like, go away. You're going to take my job away. And I, when I sense that, I try to hit it very much on the head right away and say, I don't think I've seen anybody yet who's lost a job because we came into your world. What happens more often than not is the process of gathering the data and putting it in its, final resting place, the state reporting system, if we could call it that. That's just a part of the job, but that ends up consuming a lot of people because there's a lot that has to be done with that. And if we can streamline that, guess what? Now maybe you've got time to go look in the filing cabinet and analyze some of the data, not just move it from one place to another. And that's sort of the thought process that I'm trying to think through with that. Yes? Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yes, at the very beginning they go in there, right?
And if we end up having to take them out because they haven't completed step
Yep.
ACD, we call them intended to serve. So
Yep.
we track multiple.
You have a category for students in them. Yeah, yeah, yep. Yeah. And the irony of that is, I know many programs that wait until they have 12 hours, maybe even 40 hours, and then they go into the system because, oh, that makes us look good. But guess what? That actually doesn't help you at all. In the big picture, I get the thought process, but in the big picture, if it's about transformation and it's about improvement and all of that internally, you need to know the whole story. Not just the successful story, or at least, where success is beginning to bloom, so to speak, then we'll do something with it. Because there's a lot that happened in that intermediary with that. And so that becomes a very significant part of the story. So exactly, with all of that. So yeah, so that's where I was going with that. All right, 3. What time am I supposed to finish here? I don't know. We'll just keep going until somebody comes in and says, go away. All right, principle 3, real time matters. Here's the reality. And I've belabored this point, so I'm not going to spend a bunch on it right now. If you can't quickly get to this information, then the chances are you're going to put it off and put it off and put it off until you absolutely have to do it, and then you'll spend the time. There's a day coming, I believe tomorrow, that some of you might resonate with. That is the put-off day of the year, April 15. Some of you need to go do something. There's no last session for you. You're off. Get online. But here's the reality of that, having all that information ready to go, getting it done and all that sort of thing versus used to be, I remember, post office was open until, 11:59 on that day, so you could get it postmarked in time. I don't even know if they do that anymore. Probably, most of it's submitted online. But a lot of data is done that way. And so that becomes a factor with all of this. So a real-time dashboard, it acts like a GPS. Now, how many of you drove here? All right, let me see, I'm trying to think. Who would have come the furthest? What states did you come from? California. You drove from California? All right, I was going to say, that's a long one. What other state? Ohio? Texas? All right. All right. So, like 8-10 hours, maybe, travel? How would you feel as if you pulled up your Google Maps, or I'm sorry for those of you who use Apple Maps. I'm a Google guy, so, if you pulled up your Apple Map and all that too, and your Apple Map you said, this is where I want to go, Indianapolis, and your Maps system said, that is great. I am so looking forward to your trip. Here is your last month of trips. You're good. If you go down the road, hoping I hit the right highways, etc., etc. No, we don't. We don't expect Google or Apple to do that to us on our map. We expect it to tell us where we are headed, not where we've been. You can go back and look at where you've been if you want. If you've forgotten, like I do sometimes, because I'm on the road so much, I'm like, where was I, when? You can do that, but the main purpose of it is to tell you where to go. How do I get to Indianapolis? How do I get to the JW Marriott so I can attend the COAPE conference? There might be some people out there still driving because they never made it here. It's possible, right? But you all made it here. Why? Mostly because you got on an airplane or you used your GPS to get you where you wanted to go. And that's the point of principle number 3 that I wanted to share with you. It's got to be real time and it's got to be forward looking. That's an important part of this whole process. The shift from annual data to continuous data, that's how you can leverage this to make a difference with all of that. All right, so I've just given you a list here of some things, and if you want a picture, I'll even smile with you with it. This to me is like what I would be looking at And what I think of in terms of like the 5 areas that you need to consider as you're mapping out your data and where it should go and what it should look like. Okay? How we're doing on recruitment? How many new students are we getting in? And if you're not asking the question of how they found you as a program, you're missing out on gold right there. And I would even suggest to you another one is on that topic, if you're not seeing Google as a source, a high source on your list, you're also missing out on gold. Because people are online looking for learning English, GED certifications, and if they can't find you in the local area for that, they're either abandoning the cause or going nowhere, someone else. So if that's missing, that's something that needs to be fixed. Then we're going to look at attendance, we're going to look at MSGs, we're going to look at post-testing, and then we're going to look at outcomes. That's a pretty good basic model, I think. And then I've even got some questions here that you can be asking yourself and be looking at to evaluate what you have and what you don't have when it comes to that particular information. So, again, I'll put this up in the Hoover app. You can grab it, but I think that's a pretty good model to consider. Data doesn't just measure problems. It tells you exactly where to act. Again, think steering wheel instead of filing cabinet when it comes to these things. And here are some things just to think about today. Yeah. And I love this. Every number becomes a signal. Every number becomes a signal. So, some questions to ask yourself. What are you tracking now that doesn't drive action? So, it's possible you're tracking stuff that may not be as vital. And if that's the case, put that in the filing cabinet. What equity gap is hidden to you right now? If you're not looking at all of these areas, it's highly possible you're missing something that could be a key to growth and student success. And then what decision would real-time data improve? If you had somebody on your team that sent an email to you every day saying, here's our numbers for X, and you didn't have to go hunting it, it was there waiting for you, how would that impact the journey, the success of your students, the growth of your program by asking those questions? Yeah.
Just being curious, will you also kind of like share some strategies of like how, like in one of your slides, like you talked about like actionable metrics, how to kind of like set up the weekly enrollment trends, MSG pacing,
Yep.
that kind of thing. Will you
Yeah.
also share some strategies?
Yeah. I'm going to share some examples of how we do it. So that I'll give you that. And those can be applied in a number of different ways. So yeah, and then if there's more questions around that, I'm happy to look at that. But I've got something coming up around that as well. Yeah, but those are really 3 good questions to ask as you look ahead at transformation versus just data as it stands. So, like I said, we gather a lot of data from our programs, and so we have a lot of things, and we're also always really excited to get input on things that would be more helpful, and so on and so forth there. So here are a few things that we do as part of the mix. And if you're interested in more information about Connectable, we've got a booth in there in the back corner. You can come visit us. There's stuff in the back table there. Or if you want a conversation with me, I got a business card up here. But putting real-time dashboards out there. We just made a switch on how we're presenting stuff. So we now have put in the hands of every program in Connectable's world that they can build their own dashboard with the data they need. And then going one step further, we can make it so that teachers see X data points, staff see a different set, admin sees a different set again, because not everybody needs to see the same amount of data. And so I'll show you an example of that. Alerts, being able to see when are students ready for the next step in the journey. Built-in equity views, so you don't have to spend forever hunting that down. It's all there and ready to go. I already said role-based dashboards, and then simplified compliance, making sure that the things that are important for compliance are identified and visible so everybody can see that. And so those are the things we're looking at. So here's some examples. This is from a new dashboard that we've rolled out. This is an example of just a quick overview. How many students have we had? How many are currently active? How many classes do we have, right? So that's the first set of numbers that somebody might see as they go in. Or over here, here's the total number of students, and this is the total number that have completed registration. So there is a gap there that somebody needs to follow up with to see whether those students just fell off the way and need to be brought in and encouraged, or just invited to continue, or are no longer interested anymore. That's okay too. Life changes. But knowing the gap is an important part of that. And then another one that we have built in, we've just launched this concept as well here, where we have the ability to visually see how far a student is on the registration journey, right? So I used to have it in words, and people kept saying to me it didn't compute. So I turned it into a picture, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, so this student hasn't finished registration. No, they have not. There are 6 steps, and they have done 4. Boom. So can I identify who they are and follow up? I can, because I will have down here an email, I will have a phone number, so I have that information with all of that. Then also, the other thing is, how many hours since the last time they tested? We're following that journey. So it doesn't require somebody going in and pulling this and this and this together to get a report, but it's available right there at all times to see. And then once we build a couple new other things, we're going to put this on the students' dashboard as well, so they can see how many hours. And if they know it's 40 hours so they can take their next test, guess who's going to be ready to go in 40 hours' time? That student who's tracking that is going to be like, I'm ready. And off they go on that journey. Another one that we have, just to show you again, something to consider here, this particular one, this is missed attendance. So how many days has it been since you last attended? We can filter this list by 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 80. And up here on that page where I have this, you can actually set some auto message reminders out so that students will get alerted, hey, it's been, X amount of time since we saw you. Love to see you back. Things like that, but so you can very quickly see where are the attendance gaps on that side of things. And then another report that we've found that is really helpful, this is, we call it the weekly head count in our attendance section. And what it is it's a list of every course, the number of students enrolled, and actual attendance by day. So 13 enrolled in that class. On this day, nobody showed up. On this day, 5 people showed up. You extrapolate that out a bit wider, and let's say it's a class of 30, and you're getting 1, 2, 3, 4 people coming along, and on a regular basis, you're seeing that as a pattern. There's a few actionable things that come into play there. Number 1, do I have a plan for a much bigger class than the reality is? Do I need to adjust the location, the size of the room, or something like that? Do I need to see whether there's any issues with the students who are not attending to see if we can make any improvements there? Is there something with the teacher that's happening? And so you've got the ability to go back and look at that. Or the inverse of that is, let's say it's at 13 and these numbers are like, 13, 13 on a regular basis. It may now be a case of looking at, do we need to expand this class out so that we can accommodate more students? Because you could be losing students because the classroom is too full or whatever that may be. Just like here, thank you for people who are sitting on the floor because, many times you go in, no seats, off I go. But it doesn't, this, it doesn't take a lot for adult ed students to turn around and walk out the door, if they come, right? So we were avoiding those things. So these are real-time things that are being tracked there. Here's another one, the ability to go in and create a filter with a variety of factors. So this one here that I pulled up, it's a saved filter. Students aged 16 to 24 that are male. I don't know who needs to know that. I made it up, but somebody might. Maybe even with a third factor. But the great thing is this is saved, so I don't have to go and reconfigure every time. All I have to do is pull up the save filter and I will get the latest information for that right in front of my eyes so I can take that to the next step. And then I think another one here. I guess go back here. I got one more.
Customize what is tracked or is it standard?
Oh yeah. I mean, some things are standard and some things are customizable. It all depends.
So one of the things that I think is that these passes, the
Yeah.
was upon entrance,
Yep.
their exit,
Yep.
the amount of time,
Yep.
for the lower their passes score.
Yep. It's a great one.
Right? Can you
Yeah. Well, we collect CASA scores so we can do anything we need with the data for that. Yes. Yeah. So all the test scores we have. So we can look at that data. Yeah. Yeah. Here's one from our learning management system that we're newly launching and all of that. But looking at students learning, what is their average progress right now? How many in that class have completed? And then here's an example of looking at a student record to see, okay, here's what they've done, completed, here's what they haven't, and so on. And then we can see if they've earned a certificate or not. So you have all of that at one quick glance without having to go hunt. You can run reports on that as well, but just the ability to see that visually in the journey, that makes a huge difference as you're trying to evaluate things. I know early on in the journey with adult ed, I was told, we don't need grades in adult ed, we don't need that. Now all of a sudden we're getting asked frequently to create a grade book for certain classes where we can see quiz scores, maybe some assignments, or just whether students are completing things that they're being asked to complete. So we included a grade book inside of our LMS so that you can see all of that very quickly and easily, and maybe create scores from that, maybe not, but just have that visual availability to see those things. It makes a difference. So that's just a few examples of things that I pulled that I know we get asked about or that are key parts. So in wrapping up here, I'm going to say this. What you track changes lives. It's as simple as that. Because that's what we're doing. That's what we're in the business of doing, is changing lives. What you track drives your team's priorities. What you prioritize shapes the decisions you make. What you improve changes the outcomes. And it changes the outcomes of the learners you serve. And that's the bottom line. The programs that transform communities aren't always the one with the most resources. They're the ones that use their data with intention, with equity, and with courage. It doesn't require a ton of resources to look at your numbers and determine how can we get more of what we want and improve the areas that we don't want, and then continue a journey when it comes to that. this is me. Again, I'm Neil. I'm one of the founders of Connectable. I founded this because I saw that there was not the technology that's needed within adult ed. And so this topic is one of many that we address on a regular basis, thinking about how do we make that difference, how do we make that transformation in our programs, and then ultimately in the lives of the students in our programs. So thank you all. If you've got questions, happy to answer those. And like I said, there's stuff in the back there, and I'll be here for a bit to chat if you need to. Thank you.
So the question is like to populate like attendance data, like you said, like who are missing like 1 to 11. So how would you kind of like do that data entry day-to-day basis? Like, will you connect with like attendance roster and then this program kind of?
We take attendance. We have an adult ed attendance model within our platform. So we actually collect attendance right inside of our platform where the students mark themselves in and out. We track the time, and then we report all of that data from there. So we're collecting it, and then we're pulling the reports from that within our platform. Yeah, because there really isn't, from what we know, good attendance tracking systems for adult ed programs.
So currently we are using like spreadsheets. So
Yeah.
if we use that, we
Don't need a spread.
Okay.
We are the do away with spreadsheets people.
So we currently use LACES.
Yeah.
So if we were to
And where are you? What program?
Mississippi.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
We integrate with LACES.
okay, so
Yeah.
if we were to add that with LACES,
Yeah.
what outside of LACES would this software do?
Oh my goodness, lots of things. Yeah. So LACES is a state reporting, right? So you're sending key points and all of that, and we package up registration and attendance, and we can send that into LACES and all of that. But like, for example, one of the things we do is a student dashboard.